Today's daf is daf Pei Aleph, and we start with the last line on Pei Amid Beis. The Gemara had a kasha as to, in the case of what's called mechusar zman, which means that in karbonos, if you were makriv the mother, then on that day, because of the love of oso velos beno, you cannot be makriv the vlad. So that if he went ahead and he shechted the vlad, that's called mechusar zman. In other words, as of today, he cannot bring this carbon. He cannot do the shechita on the carbon. He has to wait till tomorrow. And yet the Mishnah says that for mechusar zman, he doesn't get malchus. He only gets malchus for oso vespino. So Reb Zera wants to explain why. Why is there no malchus for the shechita of mechusar zman? Hanach lemechusar zman da kosuv nitko li esse. We have a principle in malchus that a lav hanitak li esse, like for example, the Torah says, Lo tikach ha'em al abonim shalach tishalach es ha'em. So the esse comes to be menatek the lav, which means to remove the lav from malchus. And here too, says Reb Zera, with regard to a shchita of a carbon that's mechusar zman, we have an essay to be menatek the lav. My timer, where do we find an essay with regard to this? The Omakra, the Torah says, Miyom Hashmini v'hol yerotze, which means that you have to wait till Yom Hashmini in order to be makriv the carbon for ritzui. Miyom Hashmini in Mikaralo, but not earlier than Yom Hashmini. Says Rabbi Zera, that's called a lav haba mechal essay, and it has the status of an essay. You don't get malchus for a lav haba mechal essay or a lav anitak essay. And here there's an essay that tells you wait until it's proper time. Gemara says, wait a minute. I cannot use this pasuk of miyom hashmini v'hol yerotze because I need it for a drasha of Rav Afturiki. To Rabbi Afturiki Rami, he set up a question, a contradiction between two psukim. Ksiv, on the one hand, the pasuk says Vayashivas Yomim Tachas Imo. Now, there's a period of time which is after Shivas Yomim, but before Yom HaShmini. That's called the Lila between Shvi and Shmini. So that if I only had the pasuk of V'hoya Shivas Yom Tachas Imo, means you have to wait until after 7 days have passed, then Hol Lila Chazi, then you could bring the carbon at night, meaning you don't have to wait till the next day. But on the other hand, Ksiv, Miyom Hashmini V'hola Yiratza, you have to wait till Yom Hashmini, which is the following morning, not the Lila going into the 8th. Miyom Hashmini V'hola in, Lila lo. So how do we reconcile this apparent contradiction with regard to the night, the 12-hour period between the end of the 7th day and the beginning of the daytime of the 8th day? Ketzad, how do we reconcile this? Laila l'kedusha, it means that the Torah is saying that as far as there are two aspects of every carbon. There's being magdish the carbon, and then there's bringing the carbon. Laila l'kedusha yom lahartza. It means the following, that when the Torah says that you have to wait till after the 7th day, then the Torah is saying that going into the Lila after the 7th day, you could be magdish the animal. But as far as the ritzui carbon and bringing the carbon, for that you have to wait till Yom HaShmini. So there's no stira between these two psukim, says Reb Zera, because they are referring to two different dinim. One din is as far as being magdishit, and for that you wait till after the seventh day has passed, even if you're only in the night of the eighth day. But as far as hartzah is concerned, meaning as far as offering the korban on the mizbeach, you have to wait until the eighth day. So now let's swing back to our original point. Rav Tufriki uses this pasuk of Miyom Hashmini V'Hol Yerotzeh to teach you that although you could be magdish the animal at night, you have to wait till the morning to be makriv the animal. How then can you use the pasuk Miyom Hashmini V'Hol Yerotzeh to derive the conclusion that it's a lav hanitak li'esei? This is not an essay. This is only telling you at what point in time you can be makriv the korban, meaning you have to wait till the morning of the eighth day. And the Gemara says, "Ksiv krachrini, kain tasel l'sharcha l'tzonech." There are two different psukim. There's one pasuk miyom hashmini v'hol yerotzeh. There's another pasuk, kain tasel l'sharcha u'litzonecha. And therefore, since I have two psukim, I could use the first pasuk to derive the conclusion that there's an essay, and therefore you're relieved of malchus. If you bring the korban prematurely, that's called mechusas man. And the second pasuk is going to teach me the drasha of Rav Afturiki, namely that as far as the hartzah of the korban, you have to wait until the morning of the eighth. So we have two psukim and two limud. I mean, you may notice here that Tosfos is marich, is a whole arichus dvarim here in Tosfos, because why do I need a pasuk to teach me that you bring the korban by day? The Beis Hamikdash at night is closed for business. I mean, this we know from many psukim in the Torah, that there are no korbanos that are brought at night. There's what's called hekter chalavim vevarim, meaning if you brought the korban during the day, then you could continue the burning of the chalavim and the varim on the mizbeach at night, but you can't bring a korban during the night. So the question is, why do we need this whole drasha to tell me in Mechut? Now, I'm going to give you Tosfos' answer in a nutshell. It requires a lot of yediyas and kodshim, some of which we learned together, but only on a very superficial level. There's something called im olu lo yerdu, and then there's something called im olu yerdu. Now, in many cases, when you shouldn't have put the korban on the mizbeach, but once you did it, we're going to leave it on the mizbeach and let it burn. That's called im olu lo yerdu. We don't force you to take it off the mizbeach. But here, says Tosfos, we're not just saying that if you put the korban on the mizbeach at night, then you shouldn't have done so, but im olu lo yerdu, but rather the Torah is telling me there's a psul laila, in a positive sense. It's possible at night, and therefore the halacha would be im olu yerdu. You have to take it off the mizbeach. Amar Rav Hamnuna, Omer Hoyer Rabbi Shimon, Ein oso v'espino noig bekodshim. My timer, Kevin Domer Rav Shimon shchita shein aruya lo shma shchita, is therefore shchitas kodshim nami shchita shein aruya. So Rav Hamnuna is expounding and interpreting the shita of Rabbi Shimon, namely that shchita shein aruya lav shei shmita. What does that mean? That in order for shchita to be valid and to acquire a chal shem, a status of a shchita, it has to be matir the basa b'achila. Now, in the case of kodshim, when you shecht the animal that's kodshim, although it's true that to some extent the shchita is matir the basa b'achila, but not independently. It requires zrikas hadam. The shchita is the beginning of a process that culminates with zrikas hadam, and until the zrika, you're not allowed to eat the basa. So the shchita per se is a shchita she'ena re'uya, meaning it doesn't have the power to generate a heter achila. And therefore, Rav Hamnuna says that according to Rav Shimon, who holds that shchita she'ena re'uya lav shmei shchita, we don't consider it shchita if it's not mata the basa, then any shchita of kodshim, by definition, is shchita she'ena re'uya, because we have to wait until the zrikas hadam, and therefore, ipso facto, there would be no oso ves beno in shchitas kodshim, according to Reb Shimon. Our Mishnah that speaks about oso ves beno as a lav, as a violation, even in the case of kodshim, it's going against Rabbi Shimon, namely that shchita she'ena re'uya shmei shchita. Mosiv Rava is now going to try to attack the very premise of Rav Hamnuna from a brisa. The brisa says, "Oso v'es beno kodshim bachutz." The Gemara now quotes a brisa, which in turn quotes Rabbi Shimon, in a case where on the same day he shechted both the mother and the offspring, and the case was kodshim, meaning both the mother and the offspring were kodshim. And where did he shecht it? He shechted it bachutz, outside the Azara. So that the second shchita is a violation of oso ves beno. And that's called sheni, Rabbi Shimon Omer sheni below taseh. Now again, the second animal that was shechted, called the offspring, was kodshim, as I state. That's what it says in the brisa. So what's going on over here? You just finished telling me, Rav Hamnuna, that according to Rav Shimon, kodshim is left out of oso ves beno because it's shchita she'ena re'uya. And the brisa continues and says, "Shahay Rabbi Shimon Omer, kol aroi lovo liachar zman, harei hu belotas v'yein bo kares." The second animal, we'll call it the offspring, that was shechted, is classified as roi lovo liachar zman. If he waits just till the next day, he'll bring the korban. He went ahead and he brought the korban on the same day and violated the law. Says Reb Shimon, this is called roi liachar zman, meaning it does have within it a potential of being matir the basar. And the reason for that is he could have easily waited until the next day. Now, although Rabbi Shimon admits that there's no kares here, because there's no kares in mechusar zman, so that the second shchita, meaning the shchita of the offspring, on that same day as they shechted the mother, could not possibly generate an iser of kodshim bachutz with a chiyuv kares. But nevertheless, there is a violation of the law, and he gets malchus. And why is that? Because it's roi lovo liachar zman. Chachama omrim kol shein bo kares ein bo lo taseh. Chachamim say it's a package deal. It's hava hatalia. They're interdependent. If you're going to tell me that there's no kares, and the reason for that is because you can't bring the offspring on the same day that you shechted the mother, and therefore it's mechusar zman. And if it's mechusar zman, it's not roi lovo legabe mizbeach, and therefore there's no iser kares of shchutei chutz when he shechted outside the azara. Say the Chachamim that therefore, ipso facto, there's no violation of the law at all, which means that there won't be any malchus. Not only is there no kares, but there's no malchus. The kashalon, we had a problem with this brisa. Every brisa has to be understood in and of itself. Kodshim bachutz sheni below taseh. How does Reb Shimon say that for shchitas kodshim bachutz, in the case of the second shchita, he violates a lav? How could that be? After all, Reb Shimon holds it's shchita she'ena re'uya lav sheish shchita, and certainly this shchita is eina re'uya. but rather kama muktal kotel. Is sheni mekabel bifnimhu. So let's talk for a minute about kama. Kama means the first animal. The first animal was shechted outside the azara. That shechit is not valid because in kodshim shchutei chutz is not a valid shechita. Now, if the first carbon, the first, let's call it the mother animal, was shechted in a shechita, which is not a shechita at all, then the second animal is now roy level gabi mizbeach. Why? Because what are you going to tell me? It's also vesbeno. We already shechted the mother, but that shechita, the mother, didn't register at all because it was bechutz. It was outside the azara, and that's called miktal kotal. So when the Gemara says sheni mekabel bifnim, meaning it's roy, it's suitable to bring it inside the azara. So why then does Reb Shimon say that as far as the sheni is concerned, although he gets malchus, but nevertheless he's exempt from kares? It's mamish exactly the case of the Torah of shchutei chutz. So what are you going to tell me it's mechusar zman? It's not mechusar zman because the first shchita didn't register. It was a shchita b'chutz. So therefore, kares nami l'chayev. Why does Reb Shimon exempt him from kares and say he's only chayev malchus? This is a case of shchutei chutz, and it's not mechusar zman. V'yomar Rava. So Rava, to explain this strange halacha of Reb Shimon that the sheni gets malchus without kares, and Amrila Kedi, some say that it came from a chacham named Kedi. Chisuri mechsa achitoni. You have to add something to this brisa. Now, when you're talking about kodshim, shchitas kodshim b'chutz, and you're talking about two karbanos that ushechted b'chutz, one is the mother and the other is the offspring, you have three different scenarios. Number one, you have kodshim shneim b'chutz. He shechted both the mother and the offspring outside of the azara. L'Rabbanan, according to the shita of the Chachamim, that shechita sheina ruya shmei shechita, rishon anush kares, the first one who shechted, let's say, the mother, is going to get kares because of shchutei chutz. That's undeniable. Sheni posel, upotem ilav de shchutei chutz. The second shchita, since it was done b'chutz, is, in terms of kodshim b'chutz, is posel. It cannot register, and the carbon is possible. But yet, there won't be any malchus for the lav of shchutei chutz. Why? Because shchutei chutz only applies when it would have been possible to bring it bifnim. If you take something from the azara that should have been shechted in the azara and you bring it outside the azara, then you're chayav for shchutei chutz. But you can't be chayav for shchutei chutz in a case where the sheni already shechted bipsul. And why is that? Because there's no possibility of shechting the offspring when he shechted the mother on the same day. It's osov lo espino. So there won't be any lav of shchutei chutz because this carbon is not roy to be brought bifnim, because he already shechted the mother. The Rabbi Shimon, again, this is all part of the Chisuri Mechsa, which Rava adds to the Brisa. Rabbi Shimon holds that shchita sheina ruya lav shchita, and therefore shneim anushim kares. In the case where they were both bachutz, then according to Reb Shimon, both are chayav kares. And why is that? The Rishon took a carbon and he shechted a bachut, so he's chayav kares. Now you'll tell me what the sheni was in violation of oso vs beno. That's not so. Why? Because you cannot have oso vs beno in a case of kodshim. Because as we said, you need the dam and the zrika. So it's not a shchita, it's a shchita sheina ruya. It's not a shchita ruya. Now, Memela, if you're saying that there's no mechusas man as far as the second animal is concerned, because there's no osav espino, so you can check the offspring on the same day as his mother, then it's shchutei chutz because he shechted it outside. He also will get kares. So that's the first of three scenarios. Now we get to the second one. And in the second case, although one of the two karbanos was brought bachutz, the other one was brought bifnim. L'Rabbanan, according to Rabbanan, Rishon on his kares, Sheni pasul upoter. So the one carbon that was brought bachutz, shchutei chutz, is chayev kares. But the Sheni was not roy level bifnim, and therefore can't be considered shchutei chutz. And the reason why it's not roy level bifnim is because he shechted its mother on that same day. So again, Sheni pasul upoter. So you see the double language of the Rabbana. Certainly the shchita of the second carbon is pasul because it's mechusas man. You'll ask me, so why is he poter? The answer is because it's not shchutei chutz. You can't say that he's chayav for shchutei chutz when it's mechusas man. So it seems that he would get malchus for oso vespino. Okay. The Rabbi Shimon, Sheni kosher. The second carbon that was offered is kosher because he shechted it inside, in the Azara. Remember, we said there was one carbon shechted outside the Azara and one shechted inside the Azara. And there's no oso ves beno here to tell me that it's mechusas man because the first shchita of the mother was bachutz. Now we get to the third scenario. Echad bifnim v'echad bachutz. So now what happened is the first carbon of the two was brought bifnim, which is perfectly kosher. The second carbon was shechted outside the migdash. Outside the Azara. So the Rabbanan Rishon Kosher Potter, he shechted a carbon bifnim. That's exactly what he had to do. Sheni pasul, because again it was brought outside the Azara. Upotter. Right? What are you going to say? That he should be chayav for shchutei chutz. He can't be chayav for shchutei chutz because it's mechusas man and it's not roy level. The Rabbi Shimon, on the other hand, sheni below taseh. So again, what happened here? Let's just go over the case one more time. The third scenario. He shechted the first carbon, we'll call it the mother bifnim, and he shechted the second one bachutz. Rabbi Shimon says that in the case of the sheni, he violates a lav, right below taseh. Which lo taseh? Shchutei chutz. And why isn't this called mechusas man? Because shchitas kodshim, insofar as it requires the zrikas adam, is not considered a shem shchita. Again, the Torah says he's chayav for shchutei chutz if he would shecht it bachutz. I mean, here's a case where he shechted it bifnim. So the Rabbana will say if he shechted the first carbon bifnim, then he's not allowed to shecht its offspring, and that's called mechusas man. Therefore, according to the Chachamim, the Sheni could never be chayav for Shchut Echutz because it's Mechusas Man. It's not Roy Level Mizbeach. But according to Reb Shimon, the Reb Shimon holds that Shchita Sheina Ruya Lav Shev Shchita. So the first Shchita was a Shchitas Kodshim, which requires Rikas Adam, and therefore it's not a Shem Shchita, and therefore cannot prohibit you to shech the offspring midin also vespino, and therefore it's not Mechusas Man, and therefore you be Chayav for Shchutei Chutz, and the second one is Chayav for Shchutei Chutz. Now the only thing we have to figure out is why is the Sheni only Chayav Malchus and not Kares? He says here, again, this is something I don't think we got to yet, but anyway, since the first Shechita was Shechte Bifnim, so apparently it has a Shem Shechita because we anticipate that they're going to be Zorik the Dam. And therefore, once it has a Shem Shechita, it should now generate an Iser of Oso Vespino, and therefore it's Mechusas Man. But apparently, again, this is a part of the Sugya that requires a lot of work, since it's only temporarily that this Shechita is held up and suspended in midair to be Mate the Basar until they do the Zrika. So that temporary description or categorization of the shechita does not remove the status of the shechita, and therefore we now have an iser lav of shchutei chutz for the second shochet. Oh, so now, after Rava has revamped the entire presentation, now we go back to Rav Hemnuna, the Isa kedaitach, if you're going to hold like Rav Hemnuna, that ein oso vespino noig bekodshim. Now it comes out that according to Rav Hemnuna's understanding of Rav Shimon, he understands in Rav Shimon that the fact that they haven't yet been zorik the dam makes the shchita into a shchita sheina ruya, which means now that the second shchita is not mechusas man. You're allowed to go ahead and shech the second animal, because the first animal was shchitas kodshim bifnim, which is a valid shchitas kodshim, but it cannot be mat to the boss until the zrikas adam. If that be the case, then according to the understanding of Rav Hemnuna in Ravi Shimon, then there's no Iser of Osav Espino, there's no Mechusas Man. Therefore, when the Sheni shechts bachutzi should be Chayv Koris. So again, according to Rava, he's not Chayv Koris because this is very complicated, Bein Hashmashos, this complicated status here or category where it's only temporarily Eina Ru'uya Lahater Sabos, but really it is part of the boss. Again, if we had time for the lumdus here, we'd have to figure out the relationship between Shchita and Zrika in Kodshin. But Rava is making an integration of Shchita culminating with Zrika. And therefore, inherent in the Shchita, there's a matter of the boss, and therefore becomes a Shchita Ru'uya. If it's a shchita re'uya, then it becomes mechusas man. Why? Because there would be an iser of osav espino. But according to Rav Hemnuna's understanding of Shimon, that in kodshim flat, absolute, there's no such thing as shchita re'uya, and it could never generate the iser of osav espino. And why is that? Because there's no zrika. Is then the sheni is chayav for kodshim bachutz. So has Rav Hemnuna understand the brisa that says, according to Reb Shimon, Sheni below Taseh, and he only gets Malchus? Is Koros Nami L'chayv. Ella Omar Rava. Now, Rava wants to defend Rav Hemnuna, so he's going to have to revamp Rav Hemnuna, and it can't be that Rav Hemnuna said that according to Rav Shimon, Shchitas Kodshim flat out, absolute, is never considered a Shchita. It could never generate Osav Espino. Hachi Kamar Rav Hemnuna. Let's revamp Rav Hemnuna. Ein Malkus Osav Espino Noig Bekodshim. In other words, Rav is reinterpreting Rav Hemnuna. Rav Hemnuna himself understands very well that there will be Zrikas Adam. And we have to take in consideration that once there'll be Zrikas Adam, then Igloy Milsel Mafreya, that the Shechita was mat to the bossa, because you can't have Zrikas Adam, obviously, without Shechita. And therefore, Rava says that all Rav Hemnuna meant to say about Shchitas Kodshim, according to Shimon, is that it cannot generate Malchus for the lav of Oso Vespino. And that's the revamping of Rav Hemnuna, Ein Malchus Oso Vespino Noi Bekodshim. Why? Because when he shechted the offspring, he hadn't yet been Zorik the Dam from the first carbon. Kaven the Kamalo Zorik Dam Lo Mishtere Basa. Right now, the Basa is suspended in midair, and right now you're not allowed to consume the basar because you haven't yet implemented the Zrikas Adam. However, okay, now the Gemara goes into a sugya called Hasra Safek, meaning we have a technical issue in giving Malchus for Osav Espino because we can't give him a Hasra. Why can't we give him Hasra? Because we hold Hasra Safek Lav Shmei Hasra. When we warn him, hey buddy, you better not check the offspring because you'll violate also Vespino. Wait a minute. All that depends upon whether or not there'll be Zrikas Adam of the mother. If at the end of the day, for some reason, the bossa gets lost or Tame or whatever, and you can't do Zrika, then Enochinami, the Shchita of the mother, was not a Shchita Ru'uya. And therefore, he's allowed to shech the offspring. So the whole Asra is Asra Safek. Havi Asra Safek, Asra Safek, Lo Shmei Asra. It's not a valid Asra. So we have a technical foul here in terms of implementing Malchus because it's a case of Asra Safek. I mean, honestly, I don't understand this Gemara. Forget about Asra Safek. Asra Safek is a machlokes in the Gemara Makis, whether it is Asra or not Asra. Can you give him an uncertain Hasra? Forget about all that. How can you give him Malchus in this case? You don't know whether he's going to be Zorik to Dam. So I think what the Gemara might be saying here is that even if at the end of the day he is Zorik to Dam, and now you want to say L'mafreya, the Shchita of the mother was now a Shchita Ru'uya, but the problem is you couldn't have given Hasra before the Dam for the second Shochet. Why? Because maybe at the end of the day the Zrika wouldn't have been implemented. The Azda Rav L'tamei. In other words, when Rava rewrites the script of Rav Hemnuna, this is consistent with Rava's statement elsewhere. The Amar Rava he Chullin ubna Shlomim. Okay, so now we have the following: the mother is Chullin, and the offspring was Shlomim. And he went ahead and he shechted both the mother and the offspring on the same day. In what sequence did he do so? Says Rava, if this is possibility number one, shochat chulin v'akach shochat shlomim. If he went ahead and he shechted the chulin, and now he shechted the shlomim, then according to Reb Shimon, it'll be potter for also ve'es beno, because shchitas kodshim lav shem shchita, and it had to boot the hasra safek. However, scenario number two, we switch the sequence. Shlomim, he first shechted the kodshim, the achakach chulin is chayev. He'll be chayev malchus. Now, I think what you have to add here is that he shechted the shlomim and he was zorik the dam. Let me just double check. Oh, he says once the blood of the shlomim was thrown, then the shchita is defined as a shchita re'uya. And now he can give masros vadai on the second shchita of the offspring. V'yamar Rava, another statement of Rava, he Chullin ubna ola. So now the halacha is going to change from shlomim to ola, and he shechted both the mother, which is Chullin, and the vlad, which is ola, on the same day. Lomi boy shachat Chullin v'akach shachat ola depotin. Now we go through the two scenarios in the sequence. It goes without saying that if he first shechted the Chullin, and therefore he shechted the ola, so at the moment that he shechted the ola, which was shchita number 2, it was hasra safek. Because after the shchita of the ola, we don't know whether there'll be zorik the dam. Now you might ask me, well, who cares whether there's zorik the dam? We're talking about a korban ola, which is kulei kolil, so the shchita would never be matir the basar. But it means the shchita would be matir the basar after the zrikas hadam for achilas mizbeach, which we're going to pick up a little bit later. And that makes it into a shchita re'uya. But again, it's still a hasra safek because we don't know at the time that he implemented the shchita of the ola whether or not they'll in fact implement the zrikas hadam. And here we turn Talmud Beis.